Hey, what's up everyone? How's it going? This is Watch from the MW Technology channel, and in this video we'll be doing a direct head-to-head comparison between the Oppo R5 and the Sony Xperia Z3. Now, these two phones are very similar in terms of a lot of different things. They look very similar in terms of the sleek overall design, but they have a couple of differences that might sway you to pick one over the other. So without any further ado, let's get right into the comparison and see which one comes out on top. Now, side by side, these phones are very similar in terms of overall dimensions, although the Oppo R5 is a little bit bigger in terms of its overall body size. It measures about 148.9 millimeters in terms of its height, versus the Sony Xperia Z3 is a little bit less tall at 146 millimeters and about 74.5 millimeters on the Oppo versus 72 millimeters on the Z3. In terms of thickness, we do find a huge difference. The Oppo R5 is the thinnest smartphone that you can get right now, measuring only about 4.85 millimeters versus about 7.3 millimeters on the Sony Xperia Z3. Now, in terms of weight, they pretty much feel identical, although the Oppo is a little bit heavier, measuring about 155 grams versus about 152 grams on the Z3. Now, in terms of the build quality, I do have to say that they're pretty much on par with each other. Both phones are made with exceptionally high quality build materials. The Oppo is made out of a lot of aluminum and metal components, as well as polycarbonate plastics. And the Z3 has scratch resistant glass at the back of the device, which definitely makes it a little bit more durable than most of your conventional smartphones that are out there. But in terms of ergonomics, I do have to say that the Oppo R5 is not as comfortable as I would like it to be. It has squared off edges. They're not sharp, but it's not as pleasant to hold in the hand compared to the feeling that I get when holding the Xperia Z3. Now, I am a big fan of the button placement on the Xperia Z3. It has a nice, large power standby button located at the center of the device. Very easy to grab onto no matter what size a hand you have. Additionally, you also have a dedicated camera button, which is really handy because the camera on the Z3 is probably the best on any smartphone right now. But if we move on and take a look at the screens on both of these two devices, I do have to say that they're pretty much on par with each other. They're both exactly the same size and resolution, so 5.2 inches and at 1080p, but they have different screen technology. We have AMOLED screen technology on the Oppo, and we have a standard kind of LED backlit LCD display on the Z3. Now, in real life, the Z3 color vibrancy and overall accuracy is very good. It has the X Reality engine and the Triluminous display, which is just Sony talk for mentioning that it has a pretty decent display that gives you a good overall experience when viewing it. Now, the Oppo R5, because it has that OLED screen, you are going to get better black levels and a little bit brighter brights, but in terms of white balance, I think the balance of the screen on the Z3 is a little bit more accurate to what I see in real life, and its color representation is not as exaggerated. But I do like the fact that you pretty much have pitch blacks on the Oppo, and you do have some benefits of having an OLED screen in terms of battery life, but we'll talk about battery when we get to it. But overall, definitely pretty much on par with each other on both displays. I would have to say that they're pretty much a draw in terms of display technology. Now, the internal specs on these two devices are quite different, even though they're based off similar architecture. We have the Snapdragon quad-core processor that's clocked in about 2.5 gigahertz on the Sony Xperia Z3, and Sony has done a little bit of tweaking to the processor to pretty much optimize the performance of it based on the skin that they're using and the version of Android that they're using. So it's very optimized for the phone, very quick, as we'll get to in a second. Now, the Oppo is using an octa-core Snapdragon processor, which is the 615, which has two quad-core processors, and in terms of RAM, we have 2 gigabytes of RAM on the Oppo and about 3 gigabytes on the Sony. And when we actually take a look at some of my performance benchmarks, you'll notice that we are getting faster performance out of the benchmark when we're taking a look at the scores on the Z3, getting quite a bit higher on both the multi-core score and the single-core score on Geekbench 3. And the same result follows for our Antutu benchmark, where it's getting a lot better overall graphical performance and multitasking performance and a whole bunch of things that Antutu tests out. So generally speaking, if you want the faster phone, looks like the Sony Xperia Z3 is the faster device. But in real life, when you're using the Oppo, I found no lag in terms of playing different graphically intensive games, and the color OS is very fluid as well, and the dynamics of the phone are in no way slow by any means. So it's really a premium grade smartphone, even though its internal hardware is not as fast as some of the other premium smartphones. Now, in terms of software, they're both using Android 4.4. They're both Android-based devices, but they have skins on top of them. On the Oppo, we have something called a Color OS, which is the version 2 that Oppo has designed to pretty much optimize the use of the phone. It's a very nice-looking OS. It's one of the nicer skins I find that Oppo has designed for Android, and has a lot of different gesture controls that I really like, and a whole bunch of different customizable options that is really quite excellent. And the Sony Xperia skin that goes on top of the Z3 is definitely not bad. It's really designed to be consistent with their previous line of Sony Xperia skins, and there's nothing really too special about the skin itself. It gives you all the different features that you expect from Android, but I definitely would prefer a more stock version of Android, and the Color OS is more closely represented to that, and plus you can kind of even make it look like stock Android. So I'm generally a fan of Android in its purest form, so I would generally prefer the operating system on the Oppo. Now, moving forward, let's talk about one of the most important aspects about any smartphone, and that's the rear-facing cameras. Now, in terms of the actual specs, you'll notice that the Sony Xperia Z3 is probably one of the most advanced cameras you can find in any smartphone. It has a 20.7 megapixel camera with dual LED flash, opposed to 13 megapixels that we have on the Oppo. Now, the megapixel is not really the main thing about the Sony Xperia Z3. It has a really great sensor that is pretty large, and it takes in a lot of photons, so it's pretty good in terms of low light. And in terms of video, we have full 4K 2160p capabilities at 30 frames per second, also 720p at 120 frames per second on both devices. Unfortunately, we do not have 4K video on the Oppo. It maxes out at 1080p at 60 frames per second. So what we're going to do is you guys can take a look at the photos and videos and decide what looks best to you. Now, battery is something that the Oppo R5 doesn't really shine with. One of the compromises of having a phone that's so thin is that you can only fit a certain size of battery. We have a 200 milliamp hour battery versus 3100 milliamp hour battery on the Sony Xperia Z3. And overall speaking, since they're powering the same screen size, about 5.2 inches, during my personal test, I found that the Oppo R5, after a couple of discharges and charges when it got broken in, lasts about a 12-hour day or a 14-hour day, but anything longer, you definitely want to be careful on using the screen too much, especially if you're a big multimedia user, you watch a lot of videos, play a lot of games, or do a lot of multitasking. There is a power saver mode, which will get you a couple of extra hours, but compared to the Sony Xperia Z3, where you can pretty much be a complete power hog, do a whole bunch of games, watch a lot of videos, and constantly be using it throughout, 5-minute intervals, it'll definitely last you the whole day, if not a day and a half, no problem based on my testing. But on that, guys, that's really it. If you have any specific questions about anything I talk about, please make sure to leave that on a comment down below. Make sure to give us a thumbs up. That would be really awesome. It helps us out tremendously. And check out our other comparisons of all the different smartphones we do on our channel if you haven't already. Other than that, thanks again for watching. See you later. Take care.